Welcome to Evidence Based, a new Harbinger psychology podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Stossel. On today's episode, we're talking about helping your unmotivated teen with Dr. Melanie McNally, author of Helping Your Unmotivated Teen. Melanie is a licensed clinical psychologist and brain coach who helps adolescents build self-awareness and create authentic goals for a fulfilling future. She is a strong advocate for teen mental health and has been a panelist at the White House speaking about youth mental health. She is founder of Destination U, where adolescents and their parents can access support through virtual coaching and books. She is author of The Emotionally Intelligent Teen. She also speaks to audiences of all sizes about how to increase emotional intelligence and motivation in teens. Hi, Melanie. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you about motivating our teens, and I thought we could start off with, could you talk about the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivators, and why is it important for parents to understand both of these?
Yeah, so extrinsic motivators are going to be the things that we typically think of when we think of motivation, like rewards, external rewards. So, like a good grade or getting money, like those, even like verbal praise or likes on social media, those are all going to be external motivators. Whereas intrinsic motivation comes from inside of us. So when we have something like that we're passionate about, so it really lights us up, that's going to be like this internal motivator that's going to make me want to do the thing because I'm so passionate about it. I'm excited about it. Or if something's aligned with my purpose, like if I know what my overall life purpose is and I want to keep doing the thing because it's that alignment is so strong. So we really want teens to develop intrinsic motivation. It is normal for them to respond to extrinsic motivators. And it's really normal for parents to use some bribes and things like that. But we want teens to develop the things that are going to build on the intrinsic motivation. So as they go forward in life, they're doing things that they want to be doing, and they're not doing things that are based on what they think others want them to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that teens have trouble telling the difference between the two? Like, I have to imagine with social media, even I notice myself, like, I'll be like, why do I want that thing? Like, is it because I've seen it on social, or is it because it's something fundamentally that I want?
Yes, teens do have a difficulty making that distinction. And also, even when it comes to the likes on social media, because it makes them, they get that instant gratification from it. And so then they think that this is something that's like really good for me because look I got all these likes. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is helping them understand the difference. Be like, okay, well, does it feel good because you posted something that you're really passionate about? And so even if no one liked it, you'd be okay because it's
Mm-hmm.
something that you're so excited about. Or are you only feeling good about that post because people like it? And then to help them understand that that's outside of you. So that's that external motivation. And, it's okay in small doses, but we don't want that to be the only thing driving us.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are the components of motivations, particularly for teens? And in your opinion, what does a highly motivated teen look like?
Yeah. So in my book, I break down motivation into three skill sets. We've got drive, we have grit, and we have goals. And so ultimately, when it comes to motivation, it's helping to kind of diagnose which area a teen is lacking in. Do they not have that internal drive? So are they, lacking in passion or purpose? Are they lacking in grit, where they don't have the ability to stick with something long term? Or are they lacking clear goals where they don't have a clear direction forward? And so those are the components. A highly motivated teen is going to be someone who has a lot of the grit, who has the drive. A lot of teens, it's normal for them not to have the goals just because of where their brains are in terms of development. They have a harder time thinking long term and planning that stuff out. So rarely do I see a teen that has all three, but usually a highly motivated teen is going to have some purpose, some passion. They're also going to have some grit already in place, and now they might need help with the goal section.
Do you find that working with teens, maybe the goal piece is a little harder because maybe their parents have set some goals for them versus their own goals?
Yes, that's a really good point because oftentimes that is the issue that they
Hmm.
are going after goals that their parents have set for them and aren't aligned with anything that they're really passionate or, curious about. And so it is important for parents to be able to step back because your teen might develop things like they might develop interests and passions that you really aren't that interested in or like really don't make that much sense to you, but we want them to be able to explore those things and see where it's going to lead to them. But even for the teen who has a lot of space and the parent who's given them, the opportunity to explore what they're interested in, they still struggle with the goal piece because they just don't have that prefrontal cortex
Mm.
developed yet. And so they don't quite understand, they're not able to think long term the same way that an adult brain can. And so they're not able to kind of piece together what they need to do for their future.
Okay. And we kind of talked about it with the extrinsic motivation, but why do teens' brains respond differently to rewards than our adult brains do?
So during adolescence, the brain experiences a surge in dopamine activity. And it happens in an area of the brain where a lot of reward processing occurs. So essentially, what this means is that teens have a stronger emotional reaction to rewards than adults do. And so that's one area. The other area is the prefrontal cortex is still underdeveloped or immature, however you want to phrase it. And so the teens are more focused on short-term gratification than they are, thinking long-term.
That makes sense. And obviously, teenage years come with a lot of complications, but what are some of those major obstacles that get in the way of motivation for teens?
Some of the major obstacles, I mean, the phone is a huge
Mm.
one, and I do address it in the book because it's probably one of the biggest obstacles I see. I've worked specifically with adolescents since 2013,
Mhm.
and I've noticed a big shift in their ability to be able to like regulate their emotions and tolerate boredom and tolerate discomfort and with motivation. And a lot of times it's because the screen has filled up their time. And
Mhm.
so now they're spending so much time on, things that like just scrolling mindlessly that now there's not time to do other things. They don't have time to just like daydream and be bored. Like boredom is so important for teens because it gives their brain a chance to really kind of like process what's going on in the world around them, gives their brain a chance to kind of like wander a little bit and think about different possibilities. It gives them opportunity to like go to the kitchen and, try out some new weird recipe. And then who knows where that might lead.
Mhm.
So the phone has been a huge, huge obstacle. And then on the other end of the spectrum is when I see kids who are overscheduled.
Mm.
So the parents have so much on the teen's plate that the teen now they can't, figure out what it is they want out of life or what they want to do or where they want to focus because everything is all about getting into a certain college or, achieving a certain career path or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that phone in particular. I mean, I'm clearly not a teen, but I struggle with that now as an adult, like especially post-pandemic. Like I find myself trying to emotionally regulate by scrolling. Like my husband and I always have a podcast going. Like I feel like we never let our brains just have like you're talking about that boredom. And I always say like I feel lucky that I grew up in the generation just like as the phones were coming in. Like we got phones in high school, but like I had all the way up until maybe my senior year where the phone became such a big piece of our daily lives. So I can't imagine what the teens are going through these days where they've just grown up with a phone in their hand.
Yeah, it really changes things.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask about drive. So you talked about these components of motivation. So let's start with drive. What is drive and what are the key components to that?
So drive is that internal piece. It's that internal, need to do something. And so it includes curiosity. So when teens are curious about something, that is going to lead to a potential passion. It doesn't always. Curiosities are impulsive and oftentimes they can be very short-lived, but we want teens to have the opportunity to explore lots of different curiosities. And that's where the phone is kind of like it's like a curiosity killer,
Hmm.
because they don't get to explore different curiosities, but then they can lead to a passion. And that's another component of drive. And then passions can lead to purpose. So when we have something that we're passionate about and we're, really getting into it, we might find that, okay, if I'm passionate about wildlife and now I'm spending a lot of time like, learning about wildlife, and maybe there's a sanctuary that I volunteer at. And now maybe that turns into a life purpose for me where I'm like, wow, I really want to do whatever I can to protect this particular species.
Hmm.
So curiosities can lead to passion, which can lead to purpose. And then the other two components of drive include autonomy and mastery. So autonomy is a teen's ability or their way of just being in control of a situation. And then mastery is essentially their progress in a particular skill set.
What are some ways that you recommend parents foster this? For example, like you're talking about that curiosity may lead them to multiple things that they want to try out. How, as a parent, can they support that?
So it starts with giving them time and space to explore. That is like the foundational piece. And so, I mentioned earlier those two ends of the spectrum where you might have a teen who is just on their phone constantly. And then the other end of the spectrum, you might have a teen who is so overscheduled and so busy, all they have time for are like academics and activities. What we want is we want a healthy balance. So we want a teen who is engaged, they're working on school, they've got some activities and some after school things going on, but then we also want them to have some cushion in their schedule where they don't have access to their phone or to devices. And we want that cushion to be, it's an opportunity for them now to explore. And, maybe there's something they learned in a club that they're going to spend time on now. So that's really the foundational piece that we have to start with.
Hmm. I want to dig a little more into curiosity. Do you find that they need sort of an alone time to foster this curiosity, or do you feel like, if you have a family who maybe likes to do a lot of activities together, what's sort of the balance there, and how can you foster that curiosity besides, limiting phone time and, not overscheduling them with sort of your agenda, if you will?
Yeah. So you want to give them access, if possible, access to like a variety of activities and skill sets. So they have a chance, almost like thinking of like trying on clothes, where
Hmm.
they're getting to try on different activities. And so it can be as a family where maybe, maybe your teen is part of a family unit where people enjoy spending time together and your teen likes to be part of the family. Then you guys can try out different things on the weekend. And, you try one thing one weekend, another thing another, and you kind of see what reflect back to what you're noticing in your teen. Like, wow, you seem like I noticed like you got really excited when we were in that painting class. Like, what about it did you enjoy the most?
Hmm.
You start to ask some open-ended questions to get them thinking and building that self-awareness. If you have a teen who, and this might be a little bit more typical, a teen who doesn't want to spend time with the family, then it might be helping them find activities and things that they can do outside the family. So if it's clubs at school, if it's, different sports, and if the teen is resistant, then what some parents have to do is to say, okay, you have to choose, you have to be a part of two clubs or two sports, in each semester. You can choose which ones you want to be a part of, but that's the rule here. And so you're giving them autonomy to make the choice, but and they get to pick which one. And then again, parents can use those reflection questions of like, it seemed like you really gravitate towards athletics.
Hmm.
What is it that you like about that? Or I noticed that you prefer team sports over, solo type sports. Why is that? And so you're helping them with the self-awareness.
I really love that. I think I have a friend, her son is only 6, but they are constantly doing sort of these adventure activities every weekend, going to museums and aquariums. And I can tell when I spend time with him how much of an impact all of those things have led to. So, is it important to start this even before the teen years to sort of open that up as they get older?
Yes, absolutely. Because when parents do that, like your friend is doing for their child, that child is now getting to see like the diversity out there.
Hmm.
They're getting to see all these different opportunities and to see what feels good to them and what they enjoy. And and it's normal where, a 6-year-old might be really into dinosaurs, and then that might fizzle out, in a
Hmm.
couple of years it might turn into something else, and that's totally normal. Some parents get really hung up, especially as their child gets older, if their teen changes course, where it's like, what?
Hmm.
You loved playing the violin and now you don't want to? What's wrong? But that is a normal part of the process to try things on, see what fits, what doesn't fit.
Yeah, I love that. And as we're talking about autonomy, I want to ask about why that's so important for teens and how this does play into the motivation piece. Like, what does it give them that encourages the motivation?
Yeah, so autonomy is when they have some control over something, and teens are at a phase in their life where they are becoming more independent. They're separating from the family unit. And so autonomy is really important in that level of development for them. But then even for adults, autonomy is important. If you work at a job where you're micromanaged, your every little detail of what you have to do is being dictated to you, most likely, you're not very motivated.
Yeah.
So it does play into motivation in general, but then even more so for teens because they're at that life phase of building independence and becoming more independent. So we really want to set some guidelines. So autonomy does not mean independence. It's not about like, oh, you can do whatever you
Hmm.
want. It's setting those guidelines and parameters and then letting them choose within those parameters. And so the example earlier of you can choose, you have to do 2 clubs this semester. You get to choose which ones, but you have to do 2. So letting them, you kind of give those guidelines and then let them pick within that umbrella.
Yeah, and you call it an autonomy supportive environment. Is there other ways that parents can cultivate this space in their homes?
Family meetings are a great way to do this, where instead of parents dictating what the rules are and what the consequences are, in getting kids involved, and you can do family meetings at any age, and you just, make them developmentally appropriate for whatever age they're at. But you can, and if you have kids of mixed ages, then you want to kind of go with the younger child. So the family meetings are going to be a little bit shorter, but you really want the teen to have some say in what's going on the agenda for the meeting so they can add items. If you guys decide as a family how you're going to make rules, what does that look like? If there's going to be consequences, so maybe they're starting to drive and you've set parameters around using the family car, then what are the consequences for not, meeting those rules and guidelines? And so they are participating in that. That is getting buy-in, and they are going to be so much more invested versus you just telling them, these are the rules, these are the consequences. They're not invested.
Hmm. I was the older daughter, so like I had a certain set, and then by the time my sister came around, it felt like she had a different set of rules. Like, how do you help parents who have multiple children at different age levels? How do you make sure that every child is sort of getting this opportunity to develop their motivation?
Yeah, so it gets depending on, the age gap and everything, you have to get a little bit more individualized. But in general, when you have kids at different developmental levels, parents can think of, you want to explain to everybody why it is this way. So it
Mhm.
doesn't matter, even if they're young, even if you have a 6-year-old, that the 16-year-old has different rules because they've shown that they can be responsible and they've built trust. And this is how you're going to do these same things. You're building trust, you're showing that you can be responsible. And then we start to add in new things that you can do. And so you want to make sure that it's out in the open, it's very transparent.
Mhm.
That old way of like, oh, because I said so, or because I'm the parent, that doesn't really work. And so we want, in teens especially, like things to be explained to them, even if they don't agree, they need that explanation.
Mhm.
And so just making sure that, even in the family meetings, if the rules are going to be a little bit different for the older one, just letting everybody know why that is.
Yeah.
And how that older child earned what they had to do to earn that responsibility.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Hi, I'm Dr. Daniel Fox, author of the Borderline Personality Disorder Workbook. When you first are diagnosed with BPD, or you're first told that you may have borderline personality disorder, it can be very frightening and overwhelming, because we have these ideas of what this disorder is, and you can feel trapped within it, trapped within this view or perspective of this thing that feels bigger than you and bigger than life. But the reality is that this is a disorder that can be managed, and that learning adaptive strategies can help you control it and do your life differently so that you determine the course of your life, not your BPD. To learn more and to sign up, go to bpdcourse.com.
New Harbinger online courses, self-help for everyone. Another piece, obviously, is this grit piece. Can you talk about what that is? I know it's a newer concept, at least in the zeitgeist within, I think 2016 was when the book was published. Can you talk about what is grit and how it helps us grow?
So grit is basically our ability to stick with things, to stick with a goal, despite it being difficult or boring. And when we're able to like persevere. And so it is really important for motivation and for goal setting, because no matter how passionate you are about something, no matter how dedicated you are to a goal, you are going to have times where like you're going to run into obstacles, or it's going to be really boring. It's going to get mundane. And we need that grit to be able to stick with it. It's like the Olympic swimmer who has to show up at the pool at 5 a.m., who has to do lap after lap after lap. They have to have grit, both mental and physical, to be able to stick with it. And so teens oftentimes will think that once their passion kind of, gets a little low, they'll think, oh, that must mean that this isn't a good fit for me anymore
Mm.
because I'm not passionate. And they have to understand that, nope, that's normal. Passions are going to ebb and flow. But this is where the grit comes in. This is where you have to be able to stick with something. And so we can think of it like a muscle that we can build, and we can kind of train in teens, and even in young kids. We can start to help them build grit by having them do things that are a little bit harder, where they have to stick with things. They have to tolerate boredom. They have to tolerate that emotional discomfort to build that muscle.
Yeah, I love when you talk about it being a thing that you can grow, a muscle that you can grow. What are some ways we can start?
So we can start, and again, I hate to always bring it back to the phone, but the phone has become like a emotional regulation tool, where, and I see parents do this with their kids even at a young age, where the kid has to sit in the car for 5 minutes or wait in line for 5 minutes and the parent's handing them a phone.
Mhm.
That's denying them the opportunity to learn how to tolerate boredom. And that's part of grit. So from a young age, you want your kid to be bored. And as they get older, it's normal. We want our teens to struggle. That is part of building grit. So when they run into an obstacle that's really challenging and they have to figure out how to get over it, how to get through it, we don't want to encourage them just to quit or to give up. It's like helping them, reminding them of what their purpose is, why they're working towards this particular thing, and then helping them find a way to just stay with it and stick it out. If that means coming up with other times that they had to be a little gritty. Maybe there was a softball tournament that went on and on and on. Everyone just kept scoring, and they couldn't just quit the game. They had to stay in it. What did they do? And remind them that they have those inner resources that they can pull from, and they can transfer those to other things. Having to sit for an SAT for, X amount of hours. That's real. That takes a lot of grit, and that's really
Mhm.
hard. So what did you do to be able to sit that whole time and to stay focused? How can you apply that here to this particular situation?
Yeah, and I want to ask if this is sort of the area where is grit what helps teens bounce back from, for example, things that are going on in the news? Like I feel like even when you're not 24/7 plugged into your phone, there's so much outside noise that it's easy to feel disillusioned at the state of the world, at anything. So is grit what pushes you through to keep going?
It can be, it depends on the particular issue and what, the root cause is here. But grit can be a thing, it can be a tool
Hmm.
that can help them push through. And so let's say that the teen who's really into saving wildlife, but then they find themselves getting disillusioned because they see that their, local community is raising a wetland to put in a mall.
Hmm.
They're just like, what's the point? Why should I even bother anymore? So then that might be where, okay, we have to get a little gritty here because this is something that you're passionate about. This is something that you really want to focus on. We can't let this thing over here derail you. So then helping them maybe find other things that are going on in the world that are actually really positive, or looking for role models, people who have faced these kinds of challenges before and they didn't give up, and maybe watching movies about them or reading books about them or talking about those individuals.
Yeah, I love that. And that feels like it goes into encouraging a growth mindset. So I want to ask about what can parents do when their teen does have that fixed mindset? And what are some ways that you encourage parents to model the growth mindset for their teens?
So when a teen has a fixed mindset, we have to look at where it started from. Like, where did they get it from? Because a lot of times they might have gotten it from a parent. And so if it looks like that, where, okay, now I'm really starting to see my teen has this particular mindset where they're just like, I can't do it. This is too hard. And they're giving up. The parent needs to look at themselves and say, okay, is this something that I say? Is this something that I do? And they might need to start working on it within themselves to create that change. If they don't feel like it's coming from them and they feel like, no, I'm a go-getter and I work really hard, I don't understand, then we may have to look at, okay, what are the environmental influences where the teen is getting this kind of attitude from or this kind of thought process from, and maybe changing some of what they're watching, on what media they're consuming, what books they're reading, maybe their friends encouraging them to spend time with different people. But then as you're starting to change some of the environment around them, you're getting them to look at when things have gone right for them, what their strengths are. And so each time they show this fixed mindset of, I'm not smart or I'm not good at this thing, it's not the parent just saying, no, no, that's not true. It's flipping around and saying, well, what are some times when you have been able to do this particular thing? Or when have you been able to problem solve? Or when have you been able to figure out math? And so they have to do the work internally to think about it. And that's how we can help to shift their mindset a bit.
Well, I love that flipping it back on to remind them of other times where they've gotten through it. Like, I think that's really powerful too, and a good reminder of like, well, I did do this and I have it in me to do this.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes parents will, and adults too, will do this where if they hear a teen say something like, I'm not smart, the adult immediately wants to just say, oh, that's not true. You are
Mhm.
smart. but that's not really helpful. That's not going to create that shift. Instead, if it's appropriate, we want to try and flip it on them and get them to come up with times when they've been able to overcome something, or that they've been able to do something really hard or difficult. So they're like, because we want their brain to have to kind of walk through it, because that's how they're going to actually think
Mhm.
different, not just by somebody saying, oh no, that's not true.
Yeah, absolutely. And this third piece of motivation that you lay out is goals. So what are goals and what aren't they? Because we all know the term goals, but what is an actual goal and why are they important and how can we help teens set them?
So goals essentially are our pathway forward. They are our direction in life. And they are a really, really important part of motivation, because we we can't just say, okay, this is my purpose. I need to be able to, because purpose is it can be very vague, it can be very abstract. We need to take that purpose and now break it down into smaller and smaller pieces that it gives me like a roadmap forward. So I now know what to do. And this is where I see a lot of teens and young adults where they want to stop, because goal setting is kind of tedious work,
Hmm.
and goal following is kind of hard too, because I
Yeah.
use the example of the swimmer having to show up every day and do laps. Yeah, that's kind of boring and it gets monotonous. But if we want to make it to the Olympics, like this is what we're going to have to do. Or if we want to get a certain time in the meet, this is what we're going to have to do. So it's helping them break it. A goal is breaking our purpose down into these smaller and smaller chunks. So then eventually we know on a daily level what we need to do. And then when we look at that daily list, we can almost trace it all the way back to our purpose. So my daily list might say something about, write an essay. But if I look and I follow that all the way back up, maybe that is, oh, my purpose is to write the next American great novel or something like that.
Hmm.
And that's directly connected, because that's going to help me write this novel.
Yeah. I think I could use some help with goal setting myself. Why is our environment so crucial to helping motivate teens? And what does this sort of ideal environment consist of?
So teens are very motivated by their environment outside of the home. And
Hmm.
this is part of brain development. Like I mentioned earlier, teens typically don't want as much, they're separating from their family. So social relationships are very important to them. And then also all of the media and information that they're consuming, they are forming their identities, they're figuring out who they are, they're starting to think about their futures. So environment is really important, to what they're going to be excited about, what they're going to be curious about, and who they're spending time with can be an indicator. So I mentioned earlier, if your teen just really isn't motivated, or they have that certain type of mindset, looking at like, who are their friends? Who are they talking to the most? So an ideal environment for a teen would be a teen who is getting a variety of information. So they're not just hearing information around one particular, topic or one particular viewpoint. We want them exposed to lots of healthy information, learning about maybe music, learning about, like your friend who's taking the 6-year-old to the museum and doing different things, like lots of exposure to different types of information, different types of content online. We want them to have, friend groups that might be different from each other. So maybe they have a friend group at the swim team. Maybe they have a friend group at the high school. And that's really good for them, because it allows them to, be exposed to different ideas, different thoughts. It allows them a chance to try on different identities with different people. We want them to be exposed to lots of great information at home. So parents who model healthy ways of goal setting themselves, parents who have some level of motivation, even if their motivation is to be a good person in the world. You
Mhm.
know, it doesn't have to be this huge goal of like trying to be the CEO or something. It can be, I just want to be a good person. And that's what motivates me when I go out in the world to be kind. And so they're getting that role modeling at home too.
Yeah, that's really important. And at the outset of this, obviously before someone reads through your whole book, this can seem like a really overwhelming task with a lot of pressure, obviously, because you want your team to succeed and get their motivation. But what do you recommend for an overwhelmed parent of where just to start, like a baby step?
So if they're really overwhelmed, I would say look at the three different components of motivation. So the drive, the grit, and the goals. See which area your teen is struggling the most in.
Mm,
So it is normal for teens to be struggling in more than one of those areas, but which area are they struggling the most in? And then starting in that particular area. So if you think, okay, my teen really is not very gritty, then start there.
mhm.
Start doing things to help them build that grit muscle. And then just focus on that one piece. Don't worry about the other stuff. And then maybe as you start to see them getting a little grittier, then, okay, what's another area that they're struggling in? Okay, they're not really passionate about much. So now I'm going to start doing some things to help them figure out what they're passionate about.
Yeah, that seems like a really good place to start. And as we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
No, I know it can be a lot of information. I know it can be very overwhelming, and parents today are struggling. We just had that Surgeon General report come out with the parents' well-being that it's not great right now. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by this information or to feel like you have to run out and create all of this change. I would say start with baby steps, start with what feels most manageable to you, and get support from friends, from relatives, from your community so that you don't have to go through this alone.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time and for your work. I know a lot of parents are going to get the most from this book, so thank you.
Thank you for having me.
No more arguing, punishments, or bribes. Help your child get motivated and watch them soar. You're at your wits' end again. Your teen is bright, savvy, and capable, and completely unmotivated. Whether it's too much screen time, pandemic induced resignation, or disillusionment at the state of the world, so many kids recently seem to have lost the passion to create, excel, engage, and do. What you need for them and you is a teen expert, a fresh voice to ask the right questions, make powerful suggestions, and offer proven techniques for getting your teen back in the game and focus on future fulfillment, success, purpose, and enjoyment. Melanie McNally is that expert, and she'll help you and your teen conquer whatever's been keeping them down and holding them back. Presented in simple steps, this book breaks down the three major components of motivation. Help your teen ignite their creativity and passion, work with your teen to increase their endurance and effort, encourage your teen to envision and set worthy and attainable milestones. Small changes can have huge impacts, the kind that inspire confidence, a sense of accomplishment, and the desire to keep going, keep doing, and stay the course. If you're looking to motivate your teen and set the stage for success and happiness, this book can help you get started today. Visit our website at www.newharbinger.com and use coupon code podcast25 to receive 25% off your entire order. New Harbinger Publications is an independent, employee-owned publisher of books on psychology, health, spirituality, and personal growth. For over 50 years, our evidence-based self-help books and pioneering workbooks have helped readers make positive changes to improve mental health and well-being. Founded by psychologists Matthew McKay and Patrick Fanning, New Harbinger is proud to be an employee-owned company. Our books reflect our core values of integrity, sustainability, compassion, and trust. Written by leaders in the field and recommended by therapists worldwide, New Harbinger books are practical, accessible, and provide real tools for real change. The best continuing education training does more than just fulfill requirements. It opens your mind to new possibilities, increases your confidence, and gives you powerful tools to transform your clients' lives. Praxis Continuing Education and Training partners with world-class experts to create cutting-edge, evidence-based courses for mental and behavioral health professionals. Learn how to heal trauma with Robin Walzer, explore values with Kelly Wilson, and master the basics of acceptance and commitment therapy with Matt Boone through an on-demand course. Or join experts and like-minded professionals live to take your practice to a new level. Find your next training opportunity at praxiscet.com. That's praxiscet.com. Do you have an idea for another episode? Do you want to send us a message? Our email address is podcast@newharbinger.com. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast was edited by Jesse Fancushion. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love if you rated, reviewed, and subscribed to the show, and we hope that you might share it with anyone who could benefit from the content. This podcast is not a substitute for counseling with a licensed provider.